The lounge was quiet, the dim lighting casting shadows on the walls, creating an almost secretive atmosphere. Sophia stood by the bar, her fingers nervously tracing the edge of a glass, her eyes fixed on Mark. He was seated at a corner booth, a drink in hand, looking casual yet distant. She hesitated for a moment, the weight of her decision pressing heavily on her chest. This wasn't just another casual encounter. This was something deeper, something she hadn't been ready to face until now. As she walked toward him, her steps were slow, measured, each one making the tension between them grow thicker. The air seemed to shift as she drew closer, a magnetic pull that neither of them could ignore. Mark looked up from his drink, meeting her gaze without surprise, though something flickered in his eyes. Curiosity, perhaps, or wariness. The moment they made eye contact, something unspoken passed between them, a recognition of what this conversation might bring. Sophia took a breath and sat down opposite him, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. She was no longer the confident, independent woman who had walked into the lounge earlier. Now, she was vulnerable, exposed, unsure of the response she would receive. She had no idea why she was asking this, but it felt necessary. Her voice was a whisper, but it carried an unmistakable weight. "Can I trust you?" she asked, her eyes searching his face, looking for any hint of deceit. Mark paused. The question hung in the air, as if the entire room had gone silent despite the low hum of background chatter and music. He leaned back slightly, his expression unreadable, and for a moment, Sophia wondered if she had made a mistake. Maybe this wasn't the right time or place. But then, Mark's eyes softened, and after a long beat he replied, his voice steady but low, "You can, if you want to." The words echoed in her mind, and for a fleeting second, the world around them seemed to stop. The lounge, the people, the music, it all faded into the background as she processed what he had said. She wasn't sure if his response was comforting or a warning, but something about it made her feel both relieved and unsettled at the same time. The stakes were clear now. This wasn't just about trust. It was about something far more personal, more intimate. Sophia's pulse quickened. She looked down, trying to steady her racing thoughts. Was she prepared for this? For whatever truth might come from this conversation? She met his gaze again, searching for any sign of insincerity, but all she found was calm. Almost too calm. Mark wasn't the type to reveal much, and yet there was a depth in his eyes that made her feel as if he understood more than he let on. He wasn't just answering a question, he was offering her a choice, a path forward. The room seemed to hold its breath as the silence stretched between them. The tension was palpable, the weight of their unspoken histories and emotions hanging in the air. Sophia's heart pounded in her chest as she tried to make sense of her own feelings. She had come here looking for answers, but she wasn't sure if she was ready to face them. Mark's steady gaze never wavered, as if he knew that she had crossed a threshold and there was no going back. Finally, Sophia exhaled, a soft but shaky breath. She had asked the question, and now she had to decide if she could follow through with the answer. The stakes of trust had been set, but what would she do with the opportunity he had given her? Mark leaned forward slightly, his expression still unreadable, but something about his posture, the subtle shift in his demeanor, told her that he was waiting for her next move. The tension was thick, but the decision, for the first time, felt entirely hers. Sophia shifted in her seat, tracing the rim of her glass with a finger, her gaze fixed somewhere between Mark and the dim light above. "I've been let down too many times. I don't know who to rely on," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. It was a confession that had taken months to reach the surface, and she felt exposed, vulnerable in a way that was both terrifying and liberating. Mark didn't interrupt. He simply met her eyes, steady and attentive. "Sometimes the right person comes when you least expect it," Mark replied, his voice calm, measured, carrying the weight of quiet experience. He didn't push, didn't offer empty platitudes. He simply offered a presence that made her feel seen. Sophia felt the warmth of his gaze, the subtle assurance that she wasn't being judged, that her fears weren't trivial. For the first time in a long while, she felt a small flicker of hope. The lounge seemed to fade around them as the conversation deepened. Sophia felt the tension in her chest ease slightly, her words flowing more freely. She spoke of moments when she had felt alone, of the disappointments that had taught her caution, and of the longing for someone to truly understand her. Mark listened without interruption, nodding occasionally, his attention unwavering, a quiet anchor in the storm of her emotions. Her hands trembled slightly as she continued, a subtle mix of anxiety and relief evident in her posture. "I try to protect myself to not get hurt, but it's exhausting," she said, her voice catching at the last word. Mark leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table, his gaze gentle. "I understand," he said softly. "Life doesn't make it easy to trust, but that doesn't mean it's impossible. Sometimes the risk is worth it." A silence fell over them, comfortable yet charged. Sophia felt the truth of his words seep in. The idea that vulnerability wasn't weakness, but a doorway to something meaningful. Her chest lifted slightly, and she let herself imagine the possibility of being seen without pretense. Mark's calm presence, the unspoken patience in his demeanor, made the concept of trust feel attainable for the first time in years. She smiled faintly, a soft, tentative curve of her lips that spoke volumes more than words could. "I don't even know why I'm telling you all this," she admitted, half embarrassed, half relieved. Mark's expression softened, and he shook his head gently. "Maybe it's because you feel safe enough to," he said, "and that's not nothing. It's rare to find someone who listens without trying to fix everything, who just lets you be." The words settled over them like a quiet warmth, drawing the tension from the room and replacing it with subtle intimacy. Sophia felt her shoulders relax, her breath coming a little easier. There was a fragile trust forming, delicate yet undeniable, a thread connecting them in a way that neither of them had fully anticipated. The air between them hummed with possibilities, cautious yet filled with promise. By the time she looked up, Mark's eyes were still fixed on hers, steady and unwavering. It wasn't romantic yet, not fully, but there was something profound in the acknowledgement of shared vulnerability. Sophia felt a small, cautious hope, the kind that starts as a flicker and can grow into something far greater. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she might not be facing her struggles entirely alone. The evening air was cool as Sophia and Mark walked side by side along the quiet streets, their steps almost in rhythm. Every so often, their shoulders brushed lightly, accidental yet electric, sending small shivers through Sophia. She caught herself stealing glances at him, noticing the subtle warmth in his expression and the way his presence made the world feel a little less heavy. For the first time in months, she felt a sense of ease she hadn't expected. "You don't have to face everything alone," Mark said softly, his voice carrying over the gentle hum of the city. Sophia hesitated, her gaze dropping to the pavement, uncertain if such comfort could really exist for her. "It's just hard to believe that sometimes," she admitted, her words fragile but honest. Mark's hand brushed briefly against hers as he walked, a subtle gesture of reassurance that spoke volumes more than his words could convey. They paused at a small street cafe, drawn by the soft light spilling onto the sidewalk. Sitting across from each other, they shared a quiet smile over steaming cups of tea. The conversation was light but meaningful, filled with small jokes, observations about passers-by, and shared reflections that hinted at a growing intimacy. Sophia felt the tension in her chest ease slightly, each exchange reinforcing the fragile trust between them. A brief touch on the arm, as Mark laughed at one of her comments, sent a small, unexpected thrill through Sophia. She realized she was noticing the little things, the way his eyes softened when he looked at her, the patience in his gestures, the gentle rhythm of his presence. These subtle connections, small and almost imperceptible to anyone else, were becoming the threads that slowly wove them together. As they walked again, lingering eye contact became a quiet language of its own. Neither needed to speak for the depth of feeling to be understood. Sophia felt safer than she had in a long time. As if the world had quieted down just enough for her to breathe freely. Mark, in turn, was attentive but unobtrusive, letting her lead while offering silent support, a delicate balance that made their connection feel natural and unforced. The city around them faded to background noise, the distant honk of cars, the murmur of conversations, the rustle of leaves. But the moments they shared felt vivid and real. Every smile, every small gesture, every accidental brush of hands seemed charged with meaning. Sophia marveled at how effortless it felt to be herself in his presence, as if she had been holding her breath for years and could finally exhale. Mark's soft, reassuring tone broke the comfortable silence. "I mean it, Sophia. You're not alone," he said, his eyes locking on hers, conveying sincerity beyond any words. She nodded slowly, letting herself believe, even if just a little, that perhaps she didn't have to carry everything by herself. The subtle gestures, the shared laughter, and the quiet attention created a growing foundation of trust she hadn't thought possible. By the time they parted for the night, there was a lingering warmth in the space between them. The moments, though ordinary on the surface, had established something extraordinary, a connection built on empathy, patience, and subtle intimacy. Sophia felt a cautious hope blooming, a fragile yet undeniable sense that being seen and understood could be more than a fleeting possibility. It could be real. Sophia sat across from Mark at the quiet lounge table, her fingers nervously tracing the rim of her glass. "I don't want to get hurt again," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. The words carried the weight of past disappointments, betrayals she had buried deep. Yet the truth spilled out, fragile and urgent. Mark met her gaze steadily, sensing the turmoil behind her eyes, the delicate balance of hope and fear that defined her hesitations. "And you won't, not here," Mark said softly, his voice calm but firm. There was no grand promise in his tone, only an honest attempt to reassure her, to create a safe space where vulnerability could exist without judgment. Sophia studied him closely, noting the subtle tension in his jaw, the way his hand hovered near hers, as if weighing the right moment to bridge the space between them. The lounge seemed to shrink around them, the low hum of music and chatter fading into background noise. Sophia felt the intensity of his presence pressing gently against her defenses, a magnetic pull she wanted to resist but couldn't. Each glance, each subtle gesture of attention made her heart race and her mind whirl with possibilities she had tried to ignore. Mark's own hesitation was evident, though he masked it with measured calm. His past had taught him caution, the kind that kept him guarded even when a connection was real and urgent. Yet Sophia's openness, her willingness to risk exposing herself despite fear, drew him in like a tide, compelling him to confront his own need for intimacy and trust. A brief, accidental touch as he reached for his drink sent a quiet shock through both of them. Sophia's breath caught, her pulse quickening at the proximity, the intimacy of a gesture so small yet so loaded. Mark's eyes met hers, a flicker of acknowledgement passing between them, a shared understanding that what they felt was real, even if unspoken. They spoke cautiously, their words measured but meaningful, a delicate dance around the unacknowledged attraction simmering beneath the surface. Every sentence, Every laugh, every fleeting smile carried emotional weight, a subtext that neither could fully articulate. The air between them vibrated with tension, a mixture of desire, fear, and the fragile hope of connection. Sophia's gaze softened as she observed him, the vulnerability in his eyes mirroring her own. "I don't even know if I can trust myself," she whispered, her voice tinged with both longing and doubt. Mark leaned in slightly, his voice low but steady. "You can trust me," he replied, the words simple but charged, a bridge over the chasm of past pain, a promise of presence and patience without pressure. By the time they stood to leave the lounge, the emotional tension had shifted, but not dissipated. Both felt the pull of the other's presence, the unspoken acknowledgement of something significant yet fragile. They parted with a lingering glance, hearts pounding with unexpressed emotion, aware that the path forward would require courage, patience, and a willingness to face the risks of opening their hearts fully. Sophia sat closer to Mark on the worn leather couch, the dim glow from the floor lamp casting soft shadows across the room. She fiddled with the strap of her bag, hesitating before speaking. "I've never told anyone this." "Thank you for listening," she whispered, her voice fragile but sincere. It wasn't just words, it was a release of months, maybe years, of hidden fears and unspoken burdens. Mark's gaze stayed fixed on hers, calm and unwavering, as if inviting her to continue. "I'm glad you did. You don't have to carry it alone," Mark said gently, his voice steady yet warm. The words were simple, but they carried weight, a promise that he wasn't just listening, he was present. Sophia felt a quiet shiver run down her spine, not from fear, but from the realization that someone truly understood her, accepted her, and offered a safe space without judgment or expectation. The air between them was thick with unspoken acknowledgement. Sophia's eyes shimmered with a mixture of relief and vulnerability, while Mark's hand hovered near hers, hesitant but deliberate. The smallest movements, the brush of fingers, the shift of posture, communicated more than words ever could. Every subtle gesture reinforced the fragile bond forming, a quiet intimacy that neither had felt in a long time. She took a deep breath, letting herself sink into the moment, the tension easing slightly as she felt her defenses lower. "I've been carrying this for so long, always trying to stay strong, always pretending it didn't matter," she admitted, her voice catching. Mark nodded, understanding the depth of her confession without needing to fill the silence with reassurances that would feel hollow. His presence alone was enough. Mark's eyes softened as he reached out, letting his fingertips brush lightly against hers. The touch was fleeting, yet it spoke volumes, comfort, understanding, a promise of patience. "It's okay to let it out," he murmured. "You don't have to hide pieces of yourself just to feel safe. I see you, Sophia, all of you." Her chest tightened, a mixture of fear and hope, as she realized that for the first time, someone could see her fully and still remain. The room seemed to contract, the ambient hum of the outside world fading as they focused on each other. Sophia felt a swell of gratitude, the weight of loneliness easing slightly as trust began to take root. Each shared glance, each small, deliberate gesture, the way Mark adjusted his position slightly to face her, the gentle tilt of his head, was a reinforcement that this connection was real and intentional. "I've never felt like I could share this without being judged," Sophia admitted quietly, the words almost trembling. Mark's response was immediate but gentle. "Then let's make sure it stays that way. No judgment, just understanding." His calm tone, paired with the subtle warmth in his eyes, gave her a sense of security she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. The evening air was crisp, carrying with it a quiet tension as Sophia and Mark walked through the dimly lit streets. Earlier, a brief misunderstanding at the cafe had left words unsaid and emotions tangled, a shadow hovering over the fragile trust they had built. Sophia felt a knot in her chest, questioning whether their connection could survive even minor friction. The memory of the heated exchange replayed, gnawing at her confidence. I almost walked away," Sophia admitted finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Her gaze dropped to the pavement, the vulnerability in her admission exposed and raw. Mark stopped walking, turning to face her fully, his expression a mixture of concern and quiet intensity. The way he looked at her made her heart race, the pull of their bond, testing her fears and lingering doubts simultaneously. Mark's eyes softened, and he reached out, resting a reassuring hand lightly on her shoulder. "And yet you stayed. That says more than words ever could," he said, his voice low, steady, and filled with genuine sincerity. The gesture was subtle, yet it carried a weight of reassurance, reminding her that actions often spoke louder than promises. Sophia felt the tension in her chest ease slightly, but the knot of uncertainty lingered. The misunderstanding had sparked a moment of reflection, forcing both of them to confront not just each other, but their own fears. Sophia realized she had been hesitant to trust fully, conditioned by past disappointments, while Mark had been cautious, hesitant to open himself completely after previous heartache. The shared acknowledgement of these vulnerabilities, however, became the glue that kept them tethered to each other. As they continued walking, a silence settled between them, not uncomfortable, but filled with unspoken understanding. Each glance, each subtle movement reinforced the bond that had been tested, but not broken. Sophia felt a quiet gratitude for his patience, for the way he allowed space for her emotions without pressing for immediate resolution. It was in these moments that trust proved its resilience. Mark finally spoke, his voice gentle yet firm. "We'll face things like this again, I'm sure. Life isn't perfect, but staying connected despite it, that's what matters." Sophia nodded, feeling the weight of his words, the honesty in his tone. It wasn't a grand declaration of love, but it was an affirmation of commitment to something real, something deeper than fleeting attraction. The night wrapped around them like a protective veil, the city lights reflecting in their eyes as they walked together. Sophia felt the pull of Mark's presence, the subtle comfort of knowing that even in moments of doubt, they were willing to confront the truth. The stress of the earlier misunderstanding had forced clarity, showing that their connection was not superficial. It had roots, fragile yet surprisingly strong. The evening sky was painted with soft hues of orange and purple as Sophia and Mark walked slowly along the quiet riverside path. The air was cool, carrying a gentle breeze that seemed to mirror the subtle stirring between them. Each step felt deliberate, as if they were navigating more than just the path ahead. They were walking through the delicate territory of trust and emerging feelings, both tentative and exhilarating. Mark glanced at her, the faintest trace of a smile tugging at his lips. "I care about you, more than I expected," he admitted, his voice low but sincere. Sophia's chest tightened, a mix of surprise and warmth flooding through her. The words were unhurried, honest, and carried the weight of vulnerability, the kind that made hearts flutter without needing grand gestures or dramatic declarations. Her gaze softened, meeting his with a mixture of apprehension and hope. "I think I'm starting to care too," she confessed, her voice trembling slightly, betraying the emotion she had been trying to contain. For a brief moment, the world seemed to pause, the hum of the city fading into nothingness as the gravity of their admission settled between them. They stood there close but not yet touching, the air charged with the possibilities of connection. Sophia's fingers twitched as if drawn to him, the pull of the moment undeniable. Mark noticed, and his hand moved slightly closer, almost imperceptibly, giving her the option without pressure. The subtle gestures, the tilt of a head, a glance that lingered, a quiet smile, spoke volumes. Each small movement reinforced the emotional intimacy that had grown from weeks of shared vulnerability, trust, and understanding. They continued walking, their conversation lighter now, but underpinned by a quiet significance. Every laugh, every shared observation carried an unspoken acknowledgement of the bond forming between them. Sophia felt a warmth she hadn't realized she'd been missing, a sense that someone truly saw her and valued her presence. Mark's attentiveness, his calm steadiness, made her feel safe and cherished simultaneously. A brief pause by the railing allowed them both to catch their breath and reflect on the honesty they had just shared. The subtle romantic tension was there, present in the way they leaned slightly closer, in the way their eyes lingered on each other. Yet it was grounded, built on the foundation of trust and emotional connection rather than impulsive desire, creating a fragile but enduring intimacy. Mark's hand finally brushed against hers, tentative yet intentional, a silent affirmation of the words they had spoken. Sophia's fingers responded instinctively, a quiet acknowledgement that the bond was mutual, that the care between them was real and growing stronger. In that moment, no promises were made, but a shared understanding settled, a recognition that they had crossed an invisible threshold together. By the time they parted for the night, there was a lingering warmth between them, a sense of anticipation for what lay ahead. Their connection had shifted, no longer tentative or fragile, but burgeoning with potential. Both walked away with hearts slightly lighter, minds filled with the quiet excitement of what they were building. A turning point that marked the beginning of something tender, real, and profoundly significant. The late afternoon sunlight filtered through the tall windows of the quiet cafe, where Sophia and Mark had returned, casting long shadows across the worn wooden floor. They sat close, not needing to fill the space with words, letting the comfort of shared presence speak instead. Sophia stirred her coffee absent-mindedly, glancing at Mark, feeling a warmth that had grown steadily over the weeks, a quiet reassurance she hadn't expected to find. "I never thought I could feel this safe with someone," Sophia admitted softly, her voice tinged with awe and relief. Mark looked at her with a calm intensity, the kind that made her feel both grounded and seen. His expression was gentle, unguarded, and for the first time, the subtle traces of past pain seemed distant, replaced by a quiet hope that lingered in the space between them. Mark reached across the small table, letting his fingers brush hers lightly. "Maybe trust isn't about knowing everything. It's about believing someone will be there," he said, his voice measured, calm, yet carrying a depth that made Sophia's chest tighten with emotion. The simplicity of the statement struck her, the idea that vulnerability and faith could coexist, building the foundation for something real. They lingered in silence, the hum of the cafe around them fading as they focused on the unspoken connection. Sophia reflected on the moments that had brought them here. The shared confessions, the hesitant touches, the laughter, the arguments, and the reconciliations. Each step had been small, yet deliberate, and now the tapestry of their trust and affection felt undeniable, delicate but unbreakable. Mark's eyes softened as he studied her face, noticing the subtle shift in her demeanor, the lightness that hadn't been there before. "I've never met anyone like you," he murmured. "Someone who carries so much and yet allows themselves to trust. It's rare." Sophia felt a blush rise to her cheeks, a mixture of embarrassment and quiet pride, knowing that her honesty had been seen, appreciated, and met with care rather than judgment. They spoke quietly of hopes and dreams, sharing small, intimate details about what mattered to them, the future they imagined, and the fears they still held close. Each revelation, no matter how modest, reinforced the sense of safety and understanding between them. Sophia felt a gentle swell of gratitude, recognizing that the connection she had been wary of had become a source of courage, comfort, and inspiration. Mark's presence was steady, reassuring, and profoundly attentive. Sophia noticed how naturally she could imagine confiding in him, laughing with him, and relying on him without fear of being misunderstood. The walls she had built over the years softened, brick by brick, as his calm patience and genuine care allowed her to open fully, revealing not only her vulnerabilities, but also the quiet strength that had carried her through past challenges. By the time they rose to leave, the cafe seemed to hum with the echo of their shared understanding. Hands brushed once more, lingering just enough to convey more than words ever could. The bond between them had solidified, not through grand declarations, but through subtle, consistent acts of presence, trust, and empathy. As they stepped into the evening light, there was a quiet promise between them, a sense that what they were building was real, tender, and enduring. The park was quiet, bathed in the golden hues of late afternoon sunlight. Sophia and Mark walked side by side along the winding path, the soft crunch of leaves beneath their feet marking a rhythm that felt both steady and comforting. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of autumn, and for a moment it seemed as if the world had shrunk to the space between them. "I'm glad I trusted you," Sophia said softly, her voice carrying a mixture of relief and genuine warmth. She glanced at Mark, noting the subtle smile on his lips and the ease in his posture. There was no grand gesture, no dramatic declaration, just the quiet affirmation of a bond that had grown naturally, rooted in patience, understanding, and shared vulnerability. Mark's eyes softened as he looked at her. "Me too. It changed everything," he replied, his tone calm but infused with sincerity. His hand brushed against hers lightly, testing the waters of intimacy, and when she didn't pull away, he intertwined his fingers with hers, a small gesture that conveyed trust, care, and the promise of more to come. They walked a little farther, letting the silence stretch comfortably between them. Each step reinforced a growing sense of safety and belonging, the kind that comes not from grand acts, but from consistent presence and understanding. Sophia felt a quiet swell of happiness, the tension and uncertainty of the past giving way to a serene confidence that she wasn't alone. Mark pointed to a small bench under a tree and suggested they sit, and they did, settling side by side. The conversation flowed gently, filled with reflections on past hardships and tentative plans for the future. Each shared hope, each whispered fear strengthened the connection between them, building a foundation that was both solid and tender, capable of supporting whatever came next. Sophia rested her head slightly closer to his shoulder, a subtle acknowledgement of trust and comfort. Mark's hand covered hers, fingers tightening just enough to communicate reassurance without words. The gesture was simple, unassuming, yet it spoke volumes about the depth of their bond, a quiet intimacy that didn't need dramatic flourishes to be meaningful. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the path, they stood together, hands still intertwined. Neither needed to speak to recognize the significance of the moment. Their connection was clear, their trust firmly established, and the promise of what lay ahead hung quietly in the air, unspoken yet palpable, like the pause before the next chapter of life. They finally walked toward the park's exit, side by side, moving in harmony, as if the rhythm of their steps mirrored the ease now present between them. Sophia felt the warmth of his hand in hers, the subtle reassurance of his presence beside her. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't certain, but it was real. And in that reality, in the shared smiles, touches, and quiet companionship, they had found something rare, the beginning of a future worth exploring together.